Welcome to the Steve Stine Guitar Podcast, brought to you by GuitarZoom.com. If you want to improve your guitar playing, keep listening. If you want to improve even faster, go to GuitarZoom.com, where you'll find all of Steve's premium courses, masterclasses, and memberships that'll help you quickly and easily improve your playing. Now here's your host, Steve Stine.
Hey Steve here, thank you so much for joining me. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at specific techniques that I think are really important. Maybe you've been learning how to play the pentatonic scale or some other scales, and you've been practicing, various scale techniques, things like that. But what I want to remind you of are some really important elements that really make your guitar sound more vocal, more human. And so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about bends, and we're going to be talking about vibrato, okay? Now, when we do bends, for instance, let's just take the A minor pentatonic scale. Okay, now there's three main places that people do their bends, and we call these whole step bends or 2-fret bends. So what I'm going to be doing is going to the first string, the 8th fret where my pinky goes. What I'm going to do there is I'm going to bend that up 2 frets. So the 8 is going to sound like 10. So what I could do is actually practice hearing that 10 and then bending until I reach that point. Now with bending, it's really important that you understand that bends need to ultimately, at the end of the bend, it needs to be in tune. Otherwise, it just sounds like you're out of tune, like your guitar would be out of tune. If you're doing something like this, it's going to sound like you're talking to aliens or something weird like that. You don't want that. So it's really important that when you do your bends, you're targeting the pitch that you want. Okay, so there's 3 what we call basic bends, okay? The first bend, which is the one I'm showing you here on the 8th fret of the first string. Now, when I do that bend, what I want you to notice is I'm doing it with my 3rd finger. Now, normally when I'd be playing this pentatonic, I might use my pinky to use that 8th fret. Okay, but when I actually go for the bend, I don't do a lot of my bends with my pinky. That doesn't mean that you can't, it's just I don't. So I tend to use my 3rd finger for most of those bends. So if I was coming off a lick and I knew I was going to go to that bend, I would head over to my 3rd finger, use the other 2 fingers behind it to help support that bend and control it, and then go into whatever lick I want after that. So basic bend number 1 is on, again, we're looking at A minor pentatonic, but you can move this wherever you want. But basic bend number 1 is on the 8th fret of the first string in the key of A minor pentatonic here. The second one that we would do would be on the 8th fret of the 2nd string. So again, I'm bending that up a whole step, so it's going to become a 10. Okay, so I want to use my ear and bend it until I hear the pitch that I want. Now, again, we'll get into how fast you bend and all that sort of thing in just a little bit, but understand that the first thing is just the mechanics of properly bending in tune. And again, I'm going to my 3rd finger for the bend, using the other 2 fingers behind it. Yes, I want the 5th fret if I tend to leave. If I'm going to do a bend and then leave, I'm going to head down to that 5th fret. But for the actual bend, what I like to do is, again, because my hands are relatively small, I would bring these 2 fingers up right behind this. So I've got this finger on the 8th fret, this on the 7th, and this on the 6th, and they're all working in conjunction with the turn of my wrist. Okay, I'm not pushing like this. I'm turning the wrist to bring that bend up to where I want. Now, as I bend, what you're going to notice is I get in the way, if you've done this before, I'm going to wind up getting in the way of the 3rd string. So when I bend this 2nd string up, I hit that 3rd string. Now my 2 choices are, either I'm just going to bend that 3rd string along with it, because I have to, or what I can do is I can kind of twist from underneath and get that 3rd string stuck on the tip of my ring finger, which is where it is right now. It's sitting actually on the top of all 3 of these fingers. So if I was to pick that, you're not going to hear it. And then when I release and I bring it back down, I just have to be very careful that I don't get noise from it. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll touch the adjacent string above me with the tip of my index finger. So when I come back down, you don't hear the string. Otherwise, you get kind of this kind of thing happening. So again, it takes a little while to get used to all those little techniques that are involved in making it number one, sound good, and number two, control everything else around it. So if I bend this first string, we'll call this basic bend number one. The second string comes to rest on top of these fingers. When I bring it back down, I'm going to control these other strings by kind of touching everything I don't want over here with this hand, and especially touching the string directly above me with the tip of my index finger. So when I come back down, you don't hear any noise from it. Okay, so basic bend number one, 8th fret of the first string, basic bend number two, 8th fret of the second string, and then basic bend number three is going to be the 7th fret of the third string. And again, it's a whole step bend, a 2-fret bend. So I want to hear 9. Okay, and really learn to control those. The one, I think, problem that a lot of people have when they do these is they learn how to bend and then they go, okay, I'm done.
If you're enjoying this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, go to GuitarZoom.com and consider becoming a premium member. There are 3 memberships to choose from. VIP, which gives you instant access to a library of short but powerful courses as well as new bite-sized lessons each month. There's also Play Songs that gives you step-by-step lessons so you can learn to play your favorite songs fast. And finally, there's Masterclass, university-level training on everything from soloing to music theory, from blues to home recording. For more info about these memberships and all the premium courses available to you, go to GuitarZoom.com. Now back to the podcast.
Bending is a craft in itself that's really, really important to every guitar player, especially if you do a lot of soloing. And so it's learning how to do it properly, how to control the noise, and then the third thing is how to get creative with it. You might do a nice slow bend. You might do a really fast bend. You might do what I call a double pump, which is when you do this, where you bend it up, you bring it back down a little bit, and then you bring it back up again. And the amount that you bring it back down is relative to anything. I mean, it's more a feel thing than it is a distance thing. So I'm not dropping it down, a half step or all the way down. I'm just trying to get a cool sound when I do it. Now, there are all kinds of different places on the fretboard where you can learn to do whole step or 2-fret bends. And obviously, it would be anywhere where the next note of the scale that you're working with is a whole step away. You could bend that prior note up 2 frets. But these are really common ones that you're going to see in a lot of rock and blues style soloing. Okay? Now, the next kind of bend that we've got is what is called a half-step bend. Now, if you think about it, anywhere that I would be 1 fret away, I could bend that fret lower 1/2 step higher. So let's say, for instance, now this isn't pentatonic, but let's say I was going to go to the 7th fret of the first string, and I wanted to bend it to the 8th fret because I know the 8th fret is one of my notes in the pentatonic. So I could take that 7 and bend it up 1/2 step, and it's going to become that 8. And you're going to notice there's a lot more realism, humanity, vocalism in that bend. If I was just to go, it sounds fine. But if I go, all of a sudden it takes on a different kind of sound. And for me, that's what guitar playing is all about. It's about the subtleties. It's not just getting to the end of the race and saying, I'm done, I win. It's really trying to learn how to make things sound more authentic, more organic when you play. So you might do a whole step bend and then come back with a half step bend. Or, see how I did a half step bend and then I went to that whole step. Now again, if you don't know all your scales and things, that's perfectly fine, but you might be thinking, well, how come the 7 works? Well, it's coming from a larger scale that maybe you don't know yet. But I want you to know that 7th fret, for instance, really does sound good in almost any situation if you were using minor pentatonic, whether you're in G or A or B or anything. To use that 1 fret down from the pinky is a really nice sound. So if you were playing pentatonic, Now you're going to notice sometimes I go to that note with my middle finger. Sometimes I go to that note with my third finger. It just depends on where I'm coming from and where I'm going to. I actually have a guitar course called Creative Soloing that talks all about that, about trying to think about which finger you're actually going to wind up landing on at the end of a particular phrase to prepare for the next thing that you do. Okay? But that's the bends that I want you to think about is learning how to do, at first here, just simple whole step bends, the 3 that we talked about. And then you could start exploring some half step bends, but you are going to have a little bit of knowledge of your scales and things to kind of know where to go. Okay? And then the last thing I want to leave you with bending, and then the next video I'll talk about vibrato. But the next bend is what we call a blues bend. And a blues bend is a really fun bend that just gives a little bit of blues flavor, and it's not a half step or a whole step or anything like that. It's just a little twist of the note. So let's say I was going to be, again, in A minor pentatonic. 7th fret of the 4th string is my A, and that's kind of my target. So as I'm moving, I'm going to try and target toward that A, right? So right before I get there, though, I want to create some tension, some anticipation. So what I do is I go to that 5th fret of the 3rd string, and I'm going to hold that for a second, and then right before I go to the 7th fret of the 4th string to resolve this, I give that 5th fret of the 3rd string just a little twist, a little blues bend, just a little twist, right before I go to the 7. I don't do it early, because then I'm just going to be out of tune, and it's not going to sound very good. But what I can do is play it, and then right before I leave, I give it just a little twist, a little pull with my finger, and then head to the 7th fret. Now I could go directly into it, or I could create a pause. So if you're like me, I spent many years studying all my scales and theory and things like that. But there were just certain things missing in my playing, and to really try and make it sound more and more real. And for these kinds of things, I want you to really think about how important they are, not just, again, to study them quickly and say, okay, I understand. Understanding is great. Application is greater. Okay, so being able to play something and make what you're doing sound more authentic. So that's just a quick little idea on bending, and then when you join me next time, we're going to be talking about vibrato. Next time on the Steve Stine Guitar Podcast. Hey, Steve here. Thank you so much for joining me again. Today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about using vibrato in your playing, the importance of vibrato. Now, vibrato, is taking a string and adding kind of a waveform to it. So instead of just playing, for instance, the 5th fret of the 3rd string here, I'm going to be in A minor pentatonic for our example in this lesson too. Okay, instead of just playing that note and having it be what I call static, just non-moving, what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of a wave to this. Hey, Steve Stine here from GuitarZoom.com, and thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask you a favor? Please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Your feedback means more to me than you'll ever know. And be sure to check out my YouTube channels where you'll find over 1,000 videos to help you with your guitar playing. Thanks again for listening. Stay positive, keep playing, and keep having fun.
If you'd like some help with your guitar playing but you're not sure how to get started, go to GuitarZoom.com and look for the Help Me Choose survey. By answering a few simple questions, you'll get Steve's personal recommendation of the perfect course for you. All this and more is available for you at GuitarZoom.com.